This week, of course, is Parsha Devarim. Parsha Devarim is a special Parsha because it begins the book of Deuteronomy. It begins the Sefer Devarim, the book of Devarim. I don't speak Greek or whatever it is, Latin, so I shouldn't know what Deuteronomy means, but I actually looked it up in the dictionary. I looked it up. And the English word Deuteronomy means what the Chazal call Devarim, Mishnah Torah. It means to repeat. That's what the word means, and I don't know what language. I figure it's Latin. But in other words, the Goyish translation for Sefer Devarim reflects the Teuchen of Sefer Devarim, the content, the Pnimius of Sefer Devarim, which is that it repeats. The book of Devarim is called Mishnah Torah, the repetition of the Torah. In addition, the Gemara tells us that this Sefer Devarim, which we begin today, Moshe mipiatzmei omrei, or Moshe mipiatzmei kosei, Moshe wrote it on his own initiative. If you read Chumash, the Chumash is written as a narrative, as a story. And amongst the principles of the story is Hashem, is Avraham Avinu, is Moshe Rabbeinu, and so forth. The narrator is unidentified. Who was telling us the story of the Torah is unknown. The Ramban says in his introduction to the Chumash, Shlishi Hamadaber. It's written in third person. You know, when people write novels, they choose to write it in first person, second person, or third person. First person means I went and I came, right? And the second person is he came and he went. Third person is Reuven went and Reuven came. It's different forms, different styles. You was second person, and he is third person. The Chumash is written in third person. And it says in Chassidus, the Ramban just says 5 words. Chassidus makes this a ganzer Sturm, that the names of Hashem go on Hishtalshalos. And the narrator, the one who's telling the story, this is Atzmas Ein Sof, the Eibishter himself. Which is why in Chassidus, any time Hashem refers to himself in first person, it's considered a very deep inyan, like you have in Parshas Tetzaveh, especially in other places, where Hashem speaks in first person. Sefer Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, is narrated by Moshe Rabbeinu. The first person in Devarim is Moshe. I came and I went, and Hashem told me, and I told you, and you didn't listen to me, and you rebelled against me, and rebelled against the Eibishter. Moshe is telling the story in first person. So the Gemara says that this book, Moshe mipiatzmei kosei, Moshe wrote on his own initiative. It's considered, so to speak, a different madrege, a second step in the revelation of Torah, because it's the beginning of human contribution. If the first 4 books of the Chumash are entirely from Hashem, Sefer Devarim is different. Moshe writes it. Now this is, of course, not simple. Nothing in Judaism is simple. Nothing in Torah is simple. The simple understanding would be that the first 4 books, Moshe's role is a mashpech. What does a mashpech mean? A funnel. A funnel, right? A funnel is wide at the top, narrow at the bottom, but what passes through is unaffected by the funnel. And in Sefer Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu is a meturgaman. He's a translator. He takes and he gives. In other words, there's more of the personality of Moshe Rabbeinu in the work, in the Sefer Devarim, as it's recorded in the Chumash. I must tell you that there's a Ramban who doesn't agree with this. The Ramban, in his introduction to Chumash, objects to this. The Gemara notwithstanding. The Ramban is respectful of the Gemara. But the Ramban says every word of the Chumash, from Bereshit, when they call Yisro, was written directly by Hashem, and it was written before creation. And although Chumash Devarim is written as if Moshe Rabbeinu was narrating it, but this itself Hashem wrote before creation. And this proof is very, very plain. The book begins in third person. These are the words that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke. I'll call Yisrael, all the Jewish people I'm reading. Right? Be'ever HaYarden, Ba'midbar, Ba'aravel, and so forth and so on. And it continues to be third person until like Pasuk Hey or Vav. Deuteronomy actually begins as a narrative by the same narrator who's been narrating the whole Chumash. And it's not till the 4th or the 5th Pasuk where Moshe Rabbeinu becomes the first principle. So the Ramban says the fact that Sefer Devarim begins this way is proof that Sefer Devarim also was written by Hashem directly, but this is how Hashem wanted it written. It should be written as though Moshe Rabbeinu was saying it on his own. So those are two opinions. I mean, thank God, there's two opinions, so we know it's Jewish. Right? One opinion proposes that Sefer Devarim is different, that Ramban very clearly disagrees. Sefer Devarim is also written by Hashem. The Ramban is very into this medrash, that it was written before creation, white fire on top of black fire, and so forth. In the case, this is what Sefer Devarim is. The second issue that I want to mention is that the entire book of Devarim happens in 37 days. Maximum. We will discover soon that there is a number of opinions. There's opinions who say that the whole book of Devarim was written in one single solitary day, and that on the same day that Moshe started to recite Devarim, he recited it all and he had time to pass away, all in one day. You'll see it soon in the Even Ezra. We're going to analyze this. But even according to the opinion that stretches out the book of Devarim over the maximum amount of time, it's 37 days start to finish. Because the book begins on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, the 1st of Shvat. Moshe Rabbeinu passes away the 7th of Adar. That's maximum 37 days. No book in the Chumash comes close in terms of the narrowness, the small amount of time that it occupies. Exodus, Sefer Shmois is a few years. A few years. I mean, the very beginning starts off when the Jews come to Egypt, but the book for the most part is several years. 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. But 3 years is not 37 days. The whole Sefer Devarim from beginning to the end is 37 days. From Chodesh Shvat till Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. And Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing a lot. He has a lot to say. He's chapping arayin and so forth. But there's another characteristic of Sefer Devarim. And that is that there are two themes that weave their way through the entire book. The first theme is many, many mitzvahs, a multitude of mitzvahs. Many, many, many mitzvahs. Officially, it's repetition of mitzvahs the Jews had learned earlier. The fact, however, is that many of the mitzvahs in Sefer Devarim had never appeared before. And many of the mitzvahs that were said before were not repeated in Sefer Devarim. But this is not a question. This is discussed in many, many commentaries. The fact of the matter is, Sefer Devarim has probably more mitzvahs than any other Sefer. It's a chock full of mitzvahs. There's several hundred of the 613 mitzvahs in Sefer Devarim. The second theme of the book of Devarim is Musaf. Moshe Rabbeinu was laying all the cards on the table. He says, people, I'm leaving. I got to tell you the truth. Now's the time. And to me, it's so interesting. I'll preface by a little story. There's a book published called Zikaron Lebnei Yisrael. Zikaron Lebnei Yisrael. It's a book that was written by Rabbi Jacobson, and it was published in the last 2 decades. I mean, well after he passed away. He passed away in 1975. It wasn't published till the 1990s, I guess. And it's his biography. It's an autobiography. And he writes in the very beginning that the background to this autobiography is that in Yechidus, the Rebbe told him to start writing an autobiography. So he told the Rebbe, I'm not an organized person and I don't have time. The Rebbe said, anytime you come up with a memory, write it down. Someone else will organize it. And that's exactly what happened. His grandson organized it. And it's a very, very important piece of Lubavitch history of the last 100 years. He came to Lubavitch, Tafresh Samaches, 100 years ago this year. He showed up in Lubavitch. And it's also a lot of Hasidic history that goes back 50 years before. He writes about personalities that he knew. And he has a tendency, when he mentions a person's name, to give him a brief biography, and some of the information that's in this sefer is found in no place else. He, Rabbi Saul Jacobson, founded all the Lubavitcher Mostes in America. He made the Beis Rivka, he made Adat Teda. You name it, he did it. I mean, he was involved in everything. Rabbi Jacobson, he's one of the most important Lubavitcher Hasidim of our generation. I mean, bar none. He was a very, very great public servant and a big chassid, and a rov and a mashpia. He was a very interesting person. And as an 80-year-old man, he didn't walk up Kingston Avenue. He flew up Kingston Avenue. He never aged. I mean, people described his life. You walked to his house, he was on both telephones, and the other phone was on hold. I mean, he worked 24 hours a day. There was no day, there was no night. He was an unusual man. He was a giant, a big person. He was in America in the mid-20s. He came here around 1926. By the time the previous Rebbe was arrested, he was already in America. And he was very instrumental in saving the Rebbe's life. He was a big chassid, which means he had a lot of heart. And he was a capable person, which meant he was a pragmatic. He was capable. He wasn't the only Lubavitch in America, but he was the only real chassid who had a real sense of the world and had to navigate through it. And he writes in his book that when he first got here, he had the people helping him. He said, wow, these guys are so well connected, and they can go to Washington and go to the State House. He said, I was here a year, figured out any schnook can do it. I can do that too. You don't have to be in America, you have access. He said, like, he wasn't so impressed. But he describes the Rebbe's visit here in 1929, 1930. The previous Rebbe came to America in 1929, 1930. He was here almost a whole year. He started out in New York. He was based in New York. And he traveled extensively. That was all over the eastern. He was in St. Louis, and he was in Philadelphia, and he was in Milwaukee, and he was in Washington. He met the president. He met Hoover. There's a picture of the Rebbe with Hoover. And he was all over the place. All of Chicago. He spent a long time in Chicago. There was a lot of Jews, a lot of Chabad Jews in Chicago and so forth. He traveled a lot. He was in Boston, Springfield. He was in a lot of places. And most of the good pictures of the Frierdiker Rebbe that we have, where he's healthy, were taken in America. So the Yisrael writes how he was here a year, traveled all over the place. And then before he left, there was an official banquet, a goodbye. And we have film of that banquet. If you've ever seen, they have America's Nicht Anders. This is a film that Jem gave out, the first piece of the original vision. He says the following night, the night before the Rebbe left, there was a meeting. And he called just the Tmimim. And the Rebbe, he writes, he goes, the Rebbe tun so gewasch. We got it from the Rebbe over their head. He doesn't write what the Rebbe said, but the Rebbe was very, very disappointed in them. Very, very disappointed. He was here a year, didn't say boo. Didn't say a word. When the Rebbe arrived in New York, they made accommodations for him. Within days of his arrival, the Rebbe made his own accommodations. He didn't like the arrangements. He rented a house in Crown Heights. They got him a place in Borough Park, New Borough Park, big deal. Crown Heights was the place to be. It was where all the important Jews were. He took himself an apartment in Crown Heights. There was no tent from Jews in the neighborhood. You had to walk by Minyan because he wanted to be where the action was. The Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, was an unusual public servant. I mean, he was a giant he wasn't just a holy man. He was an extremely capable organizer and leader and initiator. He was very disappointed. So we saw Jacob's night, there was a meeting, and the Rebbe told us off. And you could read from the few words that are written here that it must have been so painful to be at that meeting. Nobody knows what happened at that meeting. Rabbi Jacobson did not record what occurred. I suppose he doesn't want us to know, but you could read in the 5 words how painful it was. The Rebbe said, these are my soldiers. In Russia, you were running to the gulag. You're sitting in America and you're sleeping. I mean, the Rebbe was really unhappy. And you should know that recently, in the last 10 years, they published a volume of Igris. They published a volume of letters from the previous Rebbe with a note, with a document that was written in 1943, which is 3 years after the Rebbe arrived in New York, the second time. And it says on the note that my secretary, Mr. Mar Lieberman, will show it to the people for whom it's destined, and they are to return it to him and not to make any copies of it. And in this document also, the Rebbe says, I've been in this country 3 years, and I thought I had partners and collaborators and so forth, and I'm here alone. Everyone is sleeping. I'm mentioning this because to me this is quite interesting. A person is a leader. He needs people's help. Doesn't say a word. He expects their help. He doesn't tell them off till he's leaving. You're here in a country a year. You have work to do. And the Rebbe needed all the help he could get. If his Hasidim were not delivering the goods, say so. The Rebbe schweigt. The Rebbe didn't say a word till he left. And this, says Rashi in our Parsha, this is how Gedolei Yisrael act, for various reasons. And one of the reasons is because they don't want to rebuke twice. The Rebbe was upset. Moshe Rabbeinu has a lot on his heart. Jewish people have been acting like blanks for 40 years. And Moshe has been taking it and taking it and taking it. Now it's 37 days before his passing. He says, I want everybody to show up to now. Everyone's coming. Men, women, and children. Nobody is staying home. And over the course of 30 days, he repeats to them what has occurred over the last 40 years. And he says, fair. The nation that God took out of Egypt gave them the Torah. And he went through the list of their stupid mistakes they made again, and how many times they shot themselves in the foot. How many times they sabotaged Moshe Rabbeinu, the Eibishter. And Rashi says Moshe waits till the end. And now he's telling them off. Now, what's the point of telling them off? Make them feel bad, to make himself feel better. Obviously, as the expression is, if you don't learn from history, you're bound to repeat it. That's really the message. And as the book deepens, as the Sefer Devarim gets more involved, this priority becomes clearer and clearer as Moshe shifts from focusing on the past to focusing on the future. He shifts from saying, this is what you did wrong, this is what you did wrong too, this is what you're going to do wrong, this is what you're going to do wrong. And of course, the Rishonim scramble to figure this out. Moshe predicts, he says, I'm going to die, and you're all going to become sinners. So the Mefarshim say, this is prophecy. If it's prophecy, the Jewish people have just forfeited their free will. If they forfeited their free will, what are you holding it against them that they sinned? It's predicted. The Mefarshim all struggle with this. But that's the content, that's the essence of the book of Devarim. It's a very uniform sefer. It's a book with a very, very clear message. There's scores, probably hundreds of mitzvahs, which begin mostly in Pashas. You have a few in Voischan and Nekev, mostly in the Sheftim Keseiten Kisaveh, as the Mefarshim indicate. And it's a book full of Musar. Keep in mind that it's occurring over a very short period of time. It's very, very concentrated. And Moshe's Pashat making long speeches, long sermons. And Sefer Devarim could be read without commentary. You should know. To learn Chumash is impossible without notes. Mefarshim. Doesn't make any sense. But you can take out a book of Devarim, take a translation in English, and just start reading from the beginning out loud with a little emotion. It's extremely inspiring. There's no sefer in the Chumash that has so much musar, has so much human communication of the warmth, of the passion, of the emotional struggles of what life is, and what the Eibishter is, and what Yiddishkeit is. You can read Deuteronomy without Rashi and be very moved. Just read. Long Moshe Rabbeinu sat and just spoke and spoke and spoke and spoke and spilled his kishkes. And to me, it's ironic. He's leading his people. They're his flock. And they disappoint him again and again. He keeps quiet till the end. And now he reads them the riot act. He tells them everything. And as Rashi says, Moshe makes a point of not letting anybody stay home. Because he doesn't want anybody to say, if I had been there, I would have told him off, this Ben Amram. I want everybody present. And if anybody has anything to say, please speak now. Because otherwise, it's going to be assumed that you agree, that you concur with the fact as I'm relating them. And this is the central of the Sefer Devarim. Now, our class is not on the first pasuk for a variety of reasons, including the fact that I've already given a class on that pasuk. You can probably find it on the web. It's on the second pasuk. So what we're going to do right now is read Chumash. Okay, read a few passages from the Chumash, and you have the whole syllabus of tonight's class written on the left side of your margin. This time it actually worked out. So let's read Parshat Devarim. These are the words which Moshe Rabbeinu speaks El Kol Yisrael, to every single solitary Jew without an exception. And as I told you before, at least according to Rashi, the standard version is that this takes place over the course of 37 days. And as you'll see soon, there are those who say it actually takes place over a shorter period of time. He speaks to Kol Yisrael, Be'ever Ayadim, on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. They're east of the Yadim, and they're the border opposite Yericho, opposite the city of Jericho, which is the center of Eretz Yisrael. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu gathers the Jews, and he tells them off. And the pasuk speaks in cryptai, or cryptic. Ba'midbar in the desert. Ba'arava on the plains. Mile Suf opposite Suf. Bein Param, between a place called Param, and a place called Tevim V'Lovan. V'Chateres, and a place called Chateres. V'Dizav, and a place called Dizav, abundant gold. It's page 2. Now Rashi says that each one of these supposed places, so-called places, is a reference to an event. Okay, each one of these events. Ba'midbar, the Jewish people angered him in the desert. Ba'arava means the Jewish people angered him in Shittim. Meil Suf, they angered him at Har Sinai. Paran goes on the Meraglim, and Tefel V'Lovan goes on the Mon, and Chateres goes on Kairach, and Dizav goes on the Egel. Each one of these words is an allusion not to a place, but to an event. But then comes Pasuk Beis. When does this all occur? Achad Osar Yoim Mechorev. Going to page 4 now. It's 11 days from Choreiv. Now the simple translation of the word Choreiv is Mount Sinai. It's 11 days from Mount Sinai. Derech HaSeir, on the road which can lead you directly to the mountain of Seir. Seir is the place where Edom, Esau's descendants, live. Ad Kadesh Barnea, which will allow you to arrive in the place called Kadesh Barnea. The simple translation of this pasuk is that there's a road called Derech HaSeir, a highway, just like you have Highway 1 and Highway 95 or 395. There's a highway called Derech HaSeir. An 11 days journey on this Derech HaSeir gets you from a place called Choreiv to a place called Kadesh Barnea. Choreiv is Mount Sinai, which is in the desert, Sinai desert, not the Arabian desert, but the Sinai desert. If you ever look at a map, right, there's a big cone and a little cone. That's how it looks, a big one and a little one. The big one is the Saudi Arabian desert. The little one, that's the Sinai desert, the Sinai peninsula. And someplace in there, near the bottom actually, is, if you look at the geographical maps, the atlases, is Har Sinai. So if you travel on this road called Derech HaSeir for 11 days, you can reach Kadesh Barnea, which is right at the border of Eretz Yisrael. So he says 11 days to go from Choreiv to Kadesh Barnea. And it takes 40 years. Vahi bar ba'im shonos in the 40th year. Ba'ashti asal l'chodesh, the 11th month, be'echad l'chodesh, on the first of that month. Diber Moshe b'nei Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the sons of Israel, kechoil, according to all, Asher Tziva, Adeshem, Oisai, all that God Almighty has instructed him, Aleihim, in regard to them. Moshe is telling them what David told him to say. After he smited, he smote, he smit, who knows how you're supposed to say it? Huh? As a verb? Smit? Smote? Okay, I said that to be cute, but that's okay. A Sichei Melech HaAmayri, Sichei the king of Amayri, Asher Yeshe B'cheshben, you don't have any more words. Ve'ez Eig Melech HaBash, Asher Yeshe B'shtaris B'drei, Ve'ever Ayad Meretz, May Hoyel Moshe Be'er Seres Be'er Hate. I didn't copy more pages of Achmanis in the paper, there was no point. The point is, Moshe Rabbeinu gathers the Jewish people together, and he waits. Says Rashi. What is he waiting for? He's waiting for the partial conquest of Eretz Yisrael. I'm not coming to the Jews and lecturing them until I give them something. Because the Jews are going to say, oh, here he goes again. We're about to go into Israel. He's going to accuse us of some kind of a sin. And we're going to wander around the desert for who knows how many more years. So first thing Moshe does is he delivers. They conquered the massive nations of Siach and Enoig. If you look at a map, geographically, that's more area than the Jews would conquer when they crossed over to the western side of the Yarden. And after he's conquered this land and cleared it for them, and it's already been given away to Reuven and Gad and half of Manasseh, Moshe says, listen, you see that I'm not messing around. The Eibishter promised you the whole land. He's giving it to you. Look what he's just given, this huge piece of territory, which you weren't even supposed to get. The Goyim gave it to you on a bloody platter, as it were. He says, now let's talk business. And Moshe sits him down and he tells him off. And this is how the Parsha goes. We are going to focus exclusively on one pasuk, and that's the second pasuk. Okay, going back again to page 2, right? Achad Osar, then to page 4. Yom Echad, 11 days journey from Choreiv. Derech HaSeir, traveling on the road called Derech HaSeir, the highway called Derech HaSeir. Ad Kadesh Barnea till the Kadesh Barnea, and this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is telling about. Now, what does this mean? What does this pasuk Beis mean? The Abarbanel says it best. The Abarbanel quotes. The Abarbanel is, for those who care, page 8 in your stack, which we'll get to. Hashem will help. The clock will move slow enough. We'll get to page 8. Abarbanel says, Rashi says it means this. Everyone else says it means that. But according to all opinions, it doesn't belong here. The pasuk doesn't belong where it is. It's 11 days journey from Choreiv to Kadesh Barnea on the road of Har Seir, and Moshe Rabbeinu is lecturing the Jews. Says Rashi, what does this mean? So everybody, let's begin with Rashi on page 2. Okay, the pages are numbered. The numbered on the top and numbered on the bottom. If you can't find them, I really can't help you. Okay? Rashi is on the right. I'm sorry. Rashi is on the left. The arrow. Achad Asa Yom Echelev. It's 11 days journey from Har Sinai, where they got the Torah till Kadesh Barnea. Says Rashi. Amalei Moshe. Says Moshe to the Jewish people the following: Ru'u ma geramtem. Look what kind of an effect you had through your misdeeds, through your mistakes. Ein lochem derech tzara mechedev l'Kadesh Barnea. There's no shorter route between Choreiv and Kadesh Barnea. Kederech HaSeir is the highway called Derech HaSeir. Can't go any quicker. What's the old expression? The shortest distance between 2 points is when you travel in a straight line. That's all. It's not complicated. And that's what this Derech Harsei was, a straight line from Choreiv to Kadosh Barnea. And it's a journey of 11 days. 11 days is quite a distance, right? 11 days. A person could walk 40 mil in a day. 40 mil is 10 parsa. I would argue that 40 mil is 40 miles, but I don't want to get into trouble. A mil is a Tchum Shabbos. Tchum Shabbos is 2,000 amas, which is less than now. It's more like a kilometer. But whatever. I'm a troublemaker. 40 mil in a day times 11, that's 440 mil. It's a distance of 440 miles. 440 kilometers. It's not next door. It's 11 days journey. And you traverse that entire distance in 3 days. And Rashi qualifies. In other words, Rashi says, you traveled an 11-day journey in 3. And Rashi, the Torah is alluding, Moshe is mentioning this, is to add insult to criticism. In the first pasuk, he listed 6 or 7 events of Jewish people's self-destruction, Jewish people harming themselves. He said, oh, by the way, just to add one more to that list, you were rushing into the Holy Land. The Eibishter was moving you faster than the speed of normal human travel. Instead of traveling for 11 days, you did it in 3 days, and you shot yourself in the foot. You sabotaged it. Let's read. 20 days in Iyar they left Har Sinai. Shenema is written in Parshas Bamidbar. B'Sefer Bamidbar, Hi b'Shana Hashenis, b'Chedesh Hasheni. In the second year, that would be 2449, the 20th day in Iyar, the Jewish people left Har Sinai. And in 3 days, they arrived at this place called Kadesh Barnea. And what's the proof? The 29th of Sivan, they sent the spies. And now Rashi calculates backwards. Take off 30 days, and they were eating the meat, the quail that caused so many people to die, if you could remember. And 7 days, the Miriam was a leprous. So you got to take off 37 days. From the 20th of Iyar to the 29th of Sivan, it's 39 days. Take off 37, you're good and dry. 3 days. So they traveled 3 days. Okay. Nimtza b'shloisha yamim, in 3 days, they traversed that entire journey. And Rashi says, why? The Shechina was intent. It was urgent. To hasten your entry into the Holy Land, because you made a mistake. Right? First with the spies, and then with Kairach, and so forth and so on. It made you wander around the desert, around the nation of Seir for 40 years. So what's the intent in this second pasuk? You were 11 days journey to Israel. Hashem made that journey in 3 days, and you stunk it up. What the Eibishter wanted the last 3 days, you made sure it lasted 40 years. Right? So that's how you read the pasuk. 11 days journey from Derech Harsei Kadosh Barnea, and the Eibush did it in 3. And now it's 40 years later. What took 39 years and whatever it is, 362 extra days, that the Jewish people had a very, very difficult time trusting the Eibush and Moshe Rabbeinu. And believe me, it was a big test. This is what Rashi says. Okay, now, after Rashi, we're going to read the Rashbam. The Rashbam is Rashi's grandson, and I reckon that in terms of chronology, it was written closest to Rashi. In other words, the Rashbam is certainly before the Ramban. It's hard to place the Even Ezer. Even Ezer is a big enigma, but Rashbam is up there in terms of, he's one of the earlier Rishonim. It's on page 2. Page 2, on the lower right. It says, 11 days journey from Choreiv, says the Rashbam. He disagrees with his grandfather, and he says, you have to be very wise to understand this pasuk. Ki pasuk, and everyone's going to flip now to page 4, please. On the right, ki pasuk ze lo nichtav. The only reason this pasuk is recorded, lefi shekasav lefanenu, because later on it's going to say that the Jewish people traversed the entire desert. Okay, now skip to the 4th line, please. Skip to the 4th line. The different interprets that they traveled from Choreiv to go on the road of Harsei, which is Derech Yeshara, which is a straight path. They could have entered Israel in 11 days at Kadesh Barnea. So he's disagreeing with Rashi in one aspect. Rashi says that what should have taken 11 days took 3 days. The Rashbam says what should have taken 11 days took 11 days, but it ended up taking 40 years. So he's disagreeing about one detail. Rashi is adding an extra ness and saying that they traversed 11 days, travels in 3 days. The Rashbam says no. 11 days of walking took 11 days of walking, but 11 days is a lot less than 40 years. Okay? Because they sinned, they ended up spending many years wandering around. For 40 years. Okay? And from the place called Kadesh Barnea, they sent the spies and they spent 40 years in the desert. So the reason I am quoting, indicating the Rashbam, is to indicate really a minor distinction between him and Rashi. Rashi says that they traversed this 11-day journey in 3 days. Rashbam says they traversed it in 11 days. Bottom line is, it didn't work out the way the Eibishter Moshe Rabbeinu had planned it. Okay, this is the Rashbam. Now, what's next on our agenda? The Even HaEzer. Okay? The Even HaEzer is on page 1. If I can bother you to go back to page 1, the Even HaEzer is on page 1. There is an opinion that says, and this opinion is Rashi, more or less, the Rashbam, and also the Rasag, which is, I guess, in the top of page 2, which we're not going to read. The meaning of the words, 11 days journey from Choreiv. Derech HaSeir, the road of Seir, is how much time it would have taken to go into Israel. They traveled to the desert for 40 years. As it says in our Parsha, they traveled 40 years. So the Even HaEzer quotes Rashi in a very obscure way, but he says what Rashi says. They were supposed to go into Israel immediately. And they should have taken a journey of 3 days or 11 days, depending on whether you like that Rashbam or Rashi, it's a material. That's how much time they needed to go from Har Sinai till Israel. And then they messed it up, they spent 40 years in the desert. So Even HaEzer says, I don't agree. They're wrong. They arrived at Kadesh Barnea in the second year. And the words Vahi Bar Shana is connected with the words Diber Moshe. What the Even HaEzer is saying basically, now everybody knows, if you're familiar with my classes, that basically is, in my view, basically is pseudo-intellectual. And in this case, it's pseudo-intellectual because I'm really not sure what the Even HaEzer is saying. But the Even HaEzer is a Pashtan. Even HaEzer is a literalist. And he's not bound by Chazal. Even HaEzer is a very controversial commentary. He doesn't feel bound by what it says in the classics, in the Talmud, and the Midrash. Even HaEzer reads the Chumash like as if no other book is written. He says, what do you mean? It took 11 days to go from Har Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. I agree. Now it's 40 years later. We think in those 40 years they didn't move? They moved plenty. So he said, how could Rashi and Rashbam say that in 11 days they came to Kadesh Barnea and they spent 40 years spinning their wheels? That simply doesn't make any sense. They traveled 11 days from Har Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, and then they traveled a lot of distance between Kadesh Barnea and where they were now, 40 years later. In other words, he just assumes that it doesn't make sense to argue that in 11 days they were at the doorstep of Eretz Yisrael, and then they just wandered around and around and around and around. He says, no, I don't agree. That's all. So if that's the case, okay, this is Even HaEzer's interpretation, and it's rooted to some degree, at least, in the Even HaEzer's Breitkeit, Even HaEzer's belief that he's entitled to interpret the Chumash without any limitations from the Gemara and from the Chazal, as the Rashi is bound and the Rashbam is bound and so on. But then the Even HaEzer has a problem. If in fact they traveled 11 days journey 40 years ago, and then during the remaining 40 years they traveled much distance until they came to the entry into Israel. In other words, he's disagreeing with the Rashi and the Rashbam and the Rasag and most of the commentators. Fundamentally, he's saying they didn't come to the doorstep of Israel in 11 days. That's ridiculous. It took them 40 years to get to the doorstep of Israel. In 11 days they went from point A to point B, and then from point B to point C, and to point D, and to point E, and point F. There's 42 months, right? Until they arrive at the doorstep of Israel. So now the Even HaEzer has a new problem. What's the point of indicating that they traveled 11 days if the 11 days doesn't get him to Eretz Yisrael? You follow? He's disagreeing fundamentally with Rashi and all the others and saying, what are you talking? In 11 days they came from Har Sinai to Eretz Yisrael. Who are we kidding? It's thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. It's not thousands of miles, but in the Ibn Ezra's mind, if the Torah says they traveled for 40 years, they had 40 years worth of travel. They didn't do it in 11 days. So what's the significance of 11 days? So Ibn Ezra comes up with a whole new insight. Listen to this. Here is my opinion. The Jews traveled the desert 40 years, come? Because it took 40 years to go from where they were to Israel. That's all. Now, I know this sounds not what we're used to, but get used to the fact that when you learn Ibn Ezra, it's not going to sound like what you're used to. So if it took them 40 years to get to the Holy Land, so what's the significance of this 11 days journey? It says a gavaldik word, and a very painful word. Listen to this. Shapirushe, the meaning of this 11-day measure is Eila HaDevarim, is a reference to these words. We're about to read Book of Deuteronomy, Sefer Devarim. As I told you in my introduction, the Book of Devarim has two themes. Mitzvahs, lots of them, and Musar. Says the Ibn Ezra, Eila HaDevarim goes on the mitzvahs, not on the Musar. Another difference in Ibn Ezra and all the other Mefarshim. Most Mefarshim say that Eila HaDevarim goes on the Musar, and the Ibn Ezra no, goes on the mitzvahs. It says, Eila HaDevarim, all the mitzvahs you're about to read about in this entire book was said in the first 11 days you left Har Sinai. That's how he reads it. Everything I'm going to tell you, this entire Sefer, God told me the first 11 days after Sinai. You know why? Because after that he stopped talking to me. Let's read. Shapirushay Eila HaDevarim. The meaning of the word Eila HaDevarim, and Ibn Ezra's opinion is Shehem Divrei HaMitzvahs. Not the Musar as Rashi holds, but the mitzvahs, the commandments in the book of Deuteronomy, Haksuvim, which are recorded in our Parsha, in Re'eh, and Shoftim, and Kiteitzim, or Kitaveh, says he, Kvar, Omar, Oisam, Kachayv, Midbar, they were all said in the desert, okay? Over the course of 11 days, they left Har Sinai the 20th of Iyar. All of the mitzvahs I'm going to share with you now, at this, the conclusion of my life, we're told, because after that point Hashem didn't talk to us, which is a very painful piece of Musar, right? Diber Moshe is speaking to the Jewish people, and he's telling them all the mitzvahs, and he's also bringing along this additional point, to tell them that everything I'm going to tell you, Hashem told me in these 11 days. V'chein hu, this is his opinion of Eila HaDevarim. He disagrees with all the Rishonim, or many of the Rishonim. V'chein hu, Diber Moshe b'midbar. This is also the meaning of the words that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke in the desert. Turn to page 2, on the left, the second of the three possibilities. Okay? Ba'arava Meil Suf, which is Miyayim Shenosu Sinai. It means from the day they left Sinai, which is the 20th day of Iyar, the year 2449. Bein Paral v'Teif v'Lav Mechatzer v'Dizahav, which are Mekoimes le'Niskru Pashas Eila Masei. They're places which are not mentioned in Eila Masei. Or Niskru b'Shem Mesacherim, would have different names. This is not important, but understand what Ibn Ezra holds. We read passage 1 in the book of Devarim, right? And you have these cryptic, disconnected words: Vamidbar, Ba'arava, Meil Suf, Bein Paran, V'Teif v'Lavan, V'Chatzeres, V'Dizahav. What is that? I don't know. Polish, Greek, Portuguese. It's words that are disconnected. So actually each word is an allusion to an event. Ibn Ezra says, no, not at all. It's a location. When he says in Pasuk Beis, 11 days journey, that 11 days journey encompassed all of these places. He just completely disagrees with the standard interpretations. They left Har Sinai, Bamidbar, Ba'arava, Meil Suf, Bein Paran, V'Teif v'Lavan, V'Chatzeres, V'Dizahav. All of these locations they traveled in 11 days. Wait, slow down. We just read Masei last week. We didn't see all these names on the list of the stops. So Ibn Ezra says, don't worry about it. Either they don't mention all of them, or they had different names. I mean, we know many places that had more than one name. Don't get nervous. But the Ibn Ezra says that all of these locations, Bamidbar, Ba'arava, Meil Suf, Bein Paran, V'Teif v'Lavan, V'Chatzeres, V'Dizahav, were where they stopped over the course of those 11 days. Now keep reading Pasuk Beis. The meaning of the pointing out the 11 days, considering the fact that Even Ezer does not buy into at all. The idea that at 11 days, or 3 days, which should have been 11 days, they reached the precipice, they reached the doorstep of Etzrach. He says it's impossible. No way. 40 years journey takes 40 years, not 3 days, and not 11 days. So what's the significance of mentioning the 11 days? Zakter Azeh. Listen. Shadibir Eila Dvarim be'oisam achad. Turn to page 4 now. On the left, also everything Hashem was going to say was said in those 11 days. Okay? And it's the 11 days that Mechorev Shaholchu Mechorev and Kadosh Maneh. The first 11 days after the left Har Sinai, from Choreiv, which is Har Sinai, till Kadosh Barnea, whatever Hashem was going to tell the Jews, He told them, and He stopped talking to them. Okay? Says Even Ezer. I've already explained it to you. That Kimekadosh Barnea Hochu Amaraglim, the spies left from Kadosh Barnea. Va'achar shenishba Hashem shleichnisu la'aretz, and then Hashem vowed that they no longer go into the Holy Land. Lo yischatsha mitzvah. There was no more mitzvahs. Rak b'shnas harabayim till now, till the 40th year. Kikein matzonu. We have indications for this from Chazal, from earlier sources. Says the Even Ezer, the pshat in this pasuk is: you left Har Sinai, and you traveled these 4 or 5 or 6 places over the course of 11 days. Any mitzvahs that I'm going to teach you now, you got in those 11 days. There were no more mitzvahs after that. That's it. Because once Hashem vowed to punish the Jews and keep them in the desert, there was no more communication. That's it. Rashi says the same thing, but the Rashi is not necessarily understood to mean that God no longer spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. It says there was no longer Vayedaber. There was still Vayomer, there wasn't Vayedaber. Hashem didn't speak firmly, He spoke weakly. But the Even Ezer says there was no more mitzvahs. So Achad Asiyim is saying everything in Yiddishkeit that we have came in those 11 days. Because after Hashem stopped talking to us. Okay, v'ha'ed she'omar be'er esteir azeis, and as it says in Pasuk Gimel, or whatever it's Pasuk Hey Avav, the Mesh is interpreting the Torah. Okay. So the Even Ezer has a whole different read. I mean, no doubt that even according to the Even Ezer, this pasuk is Musar. Moshe Rabbeinu was criticizing the Jewish people. It's a different criticism, right? We traveled for 11 days. During those 11 days, Hashem liked us. If we hadn't sent spies, and we'd all been good boys, and the girls were good anyway, but been good boys, yeah, and we would not have stunk it up, it would have still taken us a period of time to get into the Holy Land. Because He doesn't agree with Rashi's assertion that in 11 days or 3 days they came to the precipice, they came to the border of the Holy Land. He says, no, it took much more time. But there would have been more communication. Because of the Meraglim, the communication ceases. And therefore, Eila Dvarim, any mitzvah, I'm now going to repeat, was recorded in those 11 days. And then, if you'll keep looking at the Even Ezer, I made a vertical line. The third vertical line. This is even more radical. Listen to this. Yesh Oivim, there's a different opinion. That Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on this very day, the first day of Shvat. You see what I'm reading? Mm-hmm. They arrived, Moshe Rabbeinu opens up his mouth, the first of Shvat, to tell people off. And as I said to you before, between that point and his passing is 37 days. The Even Ezer brings an opinion it was 24 hours, the whole Sefer Devarim, start to finish, 24 hours. Listen. V'amar niholz ki is abu shleishim. Moshe passes away. The same day the book starts, it finishes, and they mourn for 30 days. And v'yeshu sham sheish levasis. And someone wrote on top, achakach. You notice? I wrote that. Okay. And then they waited 6 more weeks until they crossed the Yarden on the 10th of Nisan. And they have proof. What's the proof? That at the end of the book of Devarim it says, Vayi be'etzem hayom hazeh, it was on the very same day Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. So those Mefarshim who say, what does it mean by etzem hayom hazeh? Ki b'yom echad, in one single solitary day, Kod hazeh sefer HaKol Yisrael, he read the entire book start to finish, u'boy meis. And the very same day he passes away, and Even Ezer doesn't agree with that. Okay, so your eyes are opened to the idea that there's a lot of different ways to read a pasuk. In Mefarsha Devarim, by the Ruach HaKodesh. Right? So read the Even Ezer. As far as we're concerned, the Even Ezer really offers us a second basic avenue. And that is, it doesn't take 11 days to go from Har Sinai to Yisrael. It certainly didn't happen in 3 days. It takes much longer. But there was something significant about these 11 days that the Torah wishes to indicate them. Okay? So far so good? Right? Okay, next. The Chizkuni, which is on page 4 and 5 says exactly the same thing as the Eben Ezra. Amamish, the same thing. He took it from the Eben Ezra, and it's interesting that he would adopt his interpretation. So we're not going to read the Cheskuni because we have to be mechazik ourselves in the fact that the clock is moving heartlessly. This is one of my quotable quotes. Clocks have no hearts. One of those things. Now, so the next thing on our agenda is the Medrash. The Medrash is on page 6. The first, if you look at the Medrash, it's on the right side, it's Tafshin Tzadik Tes. You see where I'm reading it? This is Yalkut Shemeni, which is a compilation of Medrashim. The first Medrash is Rashi, so we're not going to read that. Okay? The second Medrash is the Rashbam, and I want to read that anyway. If you look at the text, there's a vertical line. Can you see it? Yes, and next to it is a base. Oh, it's supposed to be a base. It doesn't look like a base. That's because it was written by someone with a base handwriting. Davar Acher. What is the significance of these 11 days of journeying? Ilu Zachu Yisrael, the Jewish people merited. They would have gone to the Holy Land in 11 days, which is the Rashbam's version as opposed to Rashi's. Because they did evil deeds, the Eibishter tumbled upon them. That instead of 40 days, it became 40 years. For the 40 days with the spies, it was 40 years. And it says in the Pasuk, B'mispra Yom Avagim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, you see what I'm reading? Rabbi Yehuda says, Ilu Zachal Yisrael, the Jewish people merited, L'shloisha Yomim Ha'inachas. Notice they would have gone to the Holy Land in 3 days. This is Rashi. The only person that doesn't have a source in the Medrash is Eben Ezra. I mean, everything that's, the regular Rishonim have sources in Chazal. Shanamari brings a Pasuk. Fine. Go down 2 lines or 3 lines. Beginning of the line. Rab Banoah Oimer. You see? Rabbi Banoah says, Ilu Zocho Yisrael, the Jewish people merited L'yoim Echad. They would have gone to the Holy Land on one single solitary day. Shenema, because it says in the book of Exodus, today you're leaving Mitzrayim, you can go into the Holy Land immediately. Abba Yosi ben Chanan Oimer, a 4th opinion says, Mishum Abba Kein Bardallah, Ilu Zach Yisrael, the Jewish people merited, Kiven Sha'olu Proses Ragleim and Ayam, the moment their feet stepped out of the sea, Hayu and Nechnasim La'aras, they would have walked into the Holy Land, Shenemam Aleirish. 4 opinions. 11 days, 3 days, 1 day, and no time at all. Now, the 11 days, the 3 days, and the 1 day is a miracle. How quickly you journey across the desert. But immediately, it's not a miracle. It's impossible. So I found the Rogachover. I always look at the Rogachover, and usually he frightens me away. But this is exactly 1 line. It's on page 12. And the Rogachover is a Talmudist. He's a scholar. He's a rabbi. And he says something very simple. He quotes this Medrash that we just read. You found page 12. It's at the bottom of the right side. The very bottom of the right side. Sifri Piska Beis. Top of page Gimel now. Abba Yosi v'chuli ilu zach Yisrael kiven she'olu process lagleim and ayam nechas masmem alesh v'gemer says here it's saying a lemer. The Gama Midbar Hayanechsha Begeder Eretz Yisrael, a whole new thing. Had the Jewish people merited, Israel would have expanded. Now the Rogachover is not a rabbi who gives Parsha Shurim to women on a Sunday night or to men on a Sunday night. The Rogachover was a halachic man. Everything was scholarly. So to him, this is not just a nice pshetl, a nice idea. Wow, this is a different concept in how you view the Jewish people's exodus from Egypt and entry into the Holy Land vis-a-vis the establishment of the borders of the Holy Land. But we're not in a position to analyze Rogachover. We're just not smart enough, and he doesn't offer us any information. The way I would say it, the Rogachover is making a proposal. The Jews are leaving Israel, in Egypt, going into the Holy Land. So I guess you would call it Kamus Anechos. The Eibush does a nes. The nes could be a matter of journeying a distance in the greater time. And the Nes could be a transformation, a change in the geography, in the land. In other words, the Rogatchover is saying that the Medrash is saying, you know that according to Jewish law, you can expand the borders of the Beis HaMikdash, you can expand the borders of Yerushalayim, and you can expand the borders of Eretz Yisrael. It's not a simple thing to do, but in theory it can be done. You can make the Beis HaMikdash bigger. All you need is a Melech, and a Kohen Gadol, and a Navi, and Urim V'Tumim, and a bunch of other stuff, which is of course impossible. But there is a possibility to halachically expand the borders of the Beis HaMikdash, to expand the borders of Yerushalayim, and I reckon that Rogatchover holds to expand the borders of Eretz Yisrael. Had the Jewish people been on the highest level, their Kedusha would have affected that the halacha of Eretz Yisrael would have been different. In other words, it's not a matter of Hashem moving them quickly, more expeditiously to the Holy Land. Their preparedness to go into Eretz Yisrael on the highest levels would have affected that the land of Israel would be bigger. Now, just to make things exciting, I'll explain to you what that means. If Israel is bigger, that means it's a larger area where this year the farmers are out of work, for example. A larger area where if you bought land, it comes a Jubilee, got to give it back to its former owner. In other words, a lot of things which are not so comfortable. And Yisrael has different rules. Those are holy land. In the Holy Land, nobody owns what they own. You're given a piece of land, you sell it to somebody else, and 50 years later, it boomerangs. You bought a piece of land, right? It's different, it's a whole different world. The borders of Eretz Yisrael are a different Kedusha, they're a different level of sanctity. And because they're a different level of sanctity, there's a different level of the presence of Hashem, and therefore a higher expectation of Yidden. So Eretz Yisrael would have been bigger had the Jewish people been more ready. So the first three opinions are simply talking about a nes, a miracle, moving slower, quicker, even quicker. The fourth opinion is saying it would have created a new dimension of Yiddishkeit. Now you're really correct in what you said. It's Indian from Geula, at least to some degree. But the point is, the readiness of Yidden to accept Yiddishkeit in the Holy Land would have made the Holy Land a bigger place, a more expansive place. Anyway, I'm showing you this Rogatchover just because it got my attention. I hope I've given you a correct interpretation, although frankly I doubt it. But let's continue now. Go ahead.
The next Jubilee?
There are no Jubilees. We don't keep Jubilees. We keep only sabbaticals. We've talked about this in earlier classes. Go on the internet, go look for it. It's in Parsha Devarim. In the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, they counted Yovel. Okay? The time of the second Beis HaMikdash, they counted Yovel, but they didn't keep it. The time between the first and second Beis HaMikdash, and the time since the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we just count sevens. There's no Jubilee.
We lost track.
Completely. Now the question becomes, when they built the second Beis HaMikdash, and they went back to counting Yovel, although they didn't keep Yovel, did they count Yovel from that point, or did they count Yovel if they had never stopped 70 years passed in the interim, which is a Yovel and a half, an Erech. And the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed in the 36th year of that Yovel. So you're talking about 36 plus 70 is 106 years. So now what did they do? Did they start counting 50 years from the time the Beis HaMikdash was built, which meant that they lost 6 or 7 years, lost approximately a Shemitah? Or did they start counting over again as if this was the beginning of the new? There's different opinions. When Mashiach comes, we have the same issue. In the last 2,000 years, we've counted only sevens. There's no yo-yo. It's not only that we don't keep it, we don't even count it. We only count 6, 7, 7, 7, 98, 98, 98, 98. Time of the Beis HaMikdash, they counted 100. Time of the first Beis HaMikdash, they kept Yovel, and so forth. So, having a bigger Israel has a downside. There's more mitzvahs, and you're less a balabas of yourself, but it's a place of Yiddishkeit and holiness, Gilui Elokus. And the Rogatchover proposes that the Menah is saying that the Yidden had been completely prepared, as you put it before, a union of Geula, to go to the Holy Land, would have been pushing a bigger land. More of the world would be holy. More of the world would be capable of a standard of Yiddishkeit, which is on a higher madreg. The next is the Rabbeinu Bechaya, please. And the Rabbeinu Bechaya is on page 7. The Rabbeinu Bechaya has 3 things that I want to share. The first one is Rashi. Okay, the first thing Rabbeinu Bechaya says is Rashi, which we read. this is powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. He says, Moshe is giving the Jewish people Musar. Right? He's telling them off. What are you telling them off for? For all the terrible things they did, for all the mistakes they made, for all the foolish, childish, short-sighted insistences that they evoked and provoked and imposed on Moshe Rabbeinu and on the Eibishter Kvayach. One of them was the golden calf, right? One of them was the golden calf. Dizov is the golden calf. It translates like this. 11 days after I went up on the mountain, it was all over. Listen to what he says. On the right side of the page, 3 lines in the bottom, there's a medrash which says, 11 days after Sinai, translates the medrash as follows. Achad Asa Yem, for a total of 11 days, Hayu Yisrael Mushlam HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Jewish people properly loyal to Hashem. And that's it. Climb, in other words. Meyar Boyim Yoyim Shayim Moshe Bahar. From the 40 days that Moshe Rabbeinu was on the mountain, Hayu Yisrael Achad Asa Yem V'la Yosef B'Shalom Yibim, for 11 days where they were supposed to be. The remaining 29 days, Chosh will ask the Egel, they're already planning the golden calf. Has for the Medrash, powerful. The Jewish people's abundance of gold could not hold down the temptation for idol worship more than 11 days. So this is a whole new 11 days. Moshe went up on the mountain. He's there for 40 days. 11 days into his departure, the Jews are planning a rebellion. Now the Eibishter keeps quiet till the 40th day, because the Eibishter doesn't react until the Jewish people act. He ignores their thoughts and their plans and their moods and their fantasies. Okay, dream on. The 40th day, they make the golden calf. The Eibishter says, get out of here. This is a very powerful medrash. Goes on the Egel. For 11 days, the Jews were loyal to the Eibishter, and then that's it. And from that point forward, we're trying to fix it. And then he brings another medrash. V'chadam, our second opinion, says Shnei Yomim Hayu Mishlamim. Only for 2 days were they loyal to Hashem. And then at the end of the line, it says V'chadam Yom Echad. There's 3 opinions how long the Jewish people, they got the Torah, it said Nasav and Ishma, how long did they follow Hashem without questioning? 11 days, 2 days, or a day? Davar Acher, 3rd line from the top. Next medrash. Davar Acher, Achad Asar Yom Echad. He translated Achad, the first of Asar Yom, the 10 commandments they got from the Eibishter at Sinai. Achad, the first of the 10 commandments, was violated. They made a golden calf. And this Achad Asar, you'll see later on, becomes the basis for the Hasidus that we're going to be doing with Hashem and Hashem Self on Tuesday night. Of course, everyone is going to show up and bring a friend. It's 1276 President Street. It's the corner here. I will see you all. Mrs. Shpilman is going to build special chairs. There should be enough space for you and all of your partners. But Davar Achad, the first and the most important, the 10 commandments, you angered him at Har Sinai. 2 medrashim, completely different than Rashi and the Rashbam and the Rebbe and the Medrash. 2 completely different. This is not talking about the time they left Har Sinai, but the time they received the Torah at Sinai. Right? For 11 days they were pious, for a day they were pious. The first of the 10 commandments they violated, and so forth and so on. Okay? This is the Rabbeinu Bechaya, 2 important Medrash. Next on our syllabus is the Abarbanel. Abarbanel is on page 8. Now, the Abarbanel is on page 8 on the left. Now, you'll notice that after page Ches comes page Yud Beis. That's called the magic of copy machines. The Abarbanel is 6 pages long. I'm sparing you and sparing myself wasting time sitting by a copy machine, wasting paper. So you have the questions on the right side where he brings Rashi and the Ibn Ezra and the Ramban and says, I don't like what any of them say. And on the left side, he gives his explanation. And again, a completely different interpretation, which you would never think of at all. And that's as follows. The Abarbanel is much later than the Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra is a Rishon. Ibn Ezra is the word of God. Every Rishon is Ruach HaKodesh. There's no, the Eibishter said the words of Ibn Ezra, and the words of Rashi, and the Rashbam, and the Ramban, and the Sipurno, in other words, and so on. And the Abarbanel is also Baruch HaKodesh, but he's a different level. The Abarbanel, however, is as comfortable in his creativity as the Even Ezer. He doesn't feel bound. So the Even Ezer says Eila Advarim goes on the mitzvahs. Abarbanel says Eila Advarim goes on the musar, the criticism. That we've taken for granted till this moment, Moshe bites his lip till 37 days or 24 hours, right? Before he passes away. Abraham says, I disagree. These are the words of Moshe, of Musa, that Moshe has been preaching for the last 40 years. A completely different interpretation. The words that are about to be compiled, of the Divrei Musa, Divrei Heichocha, the criticism Moshe is recording in Sefer Devarim, he's been saying them for 40 years. Where? Ba'arova, Melsuv, Ben Podem, Tefa Beloved, Mechatzedes, V'dizav. He's been criticizing them for 40 years, now it's all going to be recorded. But not that the Musar was said at the last moment, it's been being said over the course of 40 years. Okay? And on that basis, we read the last full paragraph on page 8. The meaning of the second passage. 11 days from Sinai, Moshe is giving them Musar. The way you read it is as follows. Lahaid, it's a testament, Ashashir Oysan HaMakomis, that the measure of places, Ashakara Behem Kol Zeh, all of these different events occurred. Va'ashenemar Behem Kol Atechaches Kulam, where all the Musa was said, Hu Mahalach El Alf Yem. It's a journey of 11 days. Shu Mecherev at Kadesh Baneya, B'techam Echa Kazeh. That's all. In other words, if you figure out all the trouble the Jews made, the area in which all of these troubling events occurred was an 11-day journey. How much time did it take them to traverse it? I don't know. Could have been 11 days, could have been 11 weeks, could have been 11 years. But it was in the area of land where all of these events which elicited, which called out the criticism, the repeated rebuke of Moshe Rabbeinu happened in a very small amount of space. A journey of 11 days. That's how he reads it. And the place called Kadesh Banei, all the aforementioned events occurred. Okay, and the Eibush told, and then Moshe Rabbeinu v'nemru kulam esam hatechachas, and Moshe Rabbeinu gave all of these Musa. And he concludes by saying, and I underlined it, the purpose for all this is to say, ki b'fneiim achichem, he rebuked them to their faces, and he wasn't afraid of them. Exactly the opposite of everybody else, of Rashi. It's 40 years later. The Jews who did these crimes are buried in the sand. The people he's talking to, this is the next generation. They're going to the Holy Land. Big deal. You're giving Musa to the kids for the father's sins? That sounds very useful. So they're no. All the Musa recorded in Dvarim, I said it to them then. As it was occurring. I wasn't afraid. And the meaning of the pasuk Eila Dvarim Acharos Yebechei was to say that all of these events which elicited all this Musa occurred in a very short place, in a short period of time, in a very narrow area of space. And I gave them the Musa then. Don't think I'm telling you because it's easy for me to talk to you because you weren't there. I told it to your father also. And I'm telling it to you. A completely different interpretation. It's a little bit like the Even Ezer there. Both are going to argue that 11 days doesn't get you to the Holy Land. 11 days is 11 days. Even Ezer says 11 days was when they had mitzvahs, and the Baba says 11 days is when they had musar. So essentially they're saying the same interpretation, but they're disagreeing about how you translate the words Eila Dvarim. Even Ezer says Eila Dvarim means primarily the mitzvahs, and the Baba says Eila Dvarim means primarily the Heichachim. The constant is that they're different than Rashi and the Siponu, and the Rasag and the Rashbam and the Medrash. Okay? You got it? Good. What else is on my piece of paper there? Okay, you have a Shachalat Maisei Hashem, Shachalat Ein, and the Purim Yafas and Arizal. Where are we? What do you do? Maisei Hashem is on page 9. I should find out the name of the Sefer. Yeah. Maisei Hashem was written about 350 years ago by a Jew who's called Choreiv. He was one of those, philosophers / scholars. He was a a philosopher. In those days, people believed that you could know all knowledge. Today people have discovered that it's impossible to know all knowledge. Computers can't even have all knowledge. Now they have something else called. It's called the World Wide Web, and you can't put knowledge in one place. It's just too much of it. He was a brilliant scholar, a Talmud Chacham, and a Choiker, a Jewish theologian and philosopher, and he has his approach to the Chumash. It's very interesting, very different, and his Sfarim are quoted in the Rebbe's notes to the Haggadah and so on. And I like to bring odd Sfarim because you get odd interpretations. He has a very interesting insight, which he refers to here, and that is that every Parsha Chumash is one day. Vayikra is one day, Tzav is a day, Shmini is a day, Tadri is a day, and so forth. And he calculates that from Shmos till Devarim is 38 parshas. In other words, excluding Sefer Devarim is 38 parshas. What's the cheshbon of 38 parshas? It's really 43, because you have 5 double parshas. He says Moshe was in the mountain 38 days. On the first day Hashem told him Bereshis, and the second day he told him Noach, and the third day he told him Lach Lecha, and the fourth day he told him Vayikra. That's all. It's completely, where did that come from? But that's what he says. And on that basis, Sefer Devarim has 11 parshas. And the 11 parshas Sefer Devarim are not included in the 40 days that he heard in Har Sinai. Because till Bamidbar is 43 minus 5, 38 parshas. That's how much days it was in Har Sinai. So he says like this, bottom of the right side, I'm on page 9. Okay, so Kfal Pirish Rashi, forget about Rashi. Amna, third line, I don't mean to forget about Rashi, God forbid. We learned Rashi already. I said way back in a different place in this Sefer, and I wrote the page number on it, although I don't think anybody's ever going to find the Sefer Maseh Hashem. I don't know how I found it. It's another miracle. Like the book found me, I didn't find the book. The idea of Yom Yav Yom Shaval Mashakos of Hoyel Moshe Be'eres HaTeirah. The Torah is being reinterpreted, explained by Moshe Rabbeinu. According to Rashi, was translated into 70 languages. Says he, Shakol Mishnah Torah, the whole book of Dvarim, who Yudal of Pashas is 11 Pashas. And he taught them in 11 days. Means the book we're about to read didn't take 37 days, as Rashi would hold. It didn't take one day, as the Ebenezer mentioned. It took 11 days. In other words, according to this, Maaseh Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, Yud Aleph Shvat. 11 days, each day is a Parsha, and the 11th day, V'yom Moshe Hashem, 11th of Shvat, Yud Aleph Shvat. Interessante Pshat. Now the problem you have with this is, if you're going to double up the double Pashas, shouldn't you double up the Tzadma Vayelech also? They're also a double Parsha, yeah? So you have Dvarim, Vascham, Eker, Reish, Shevtim, Teitzi, Saveh, right? Nitzad Vayelech together, Din Zebrach is 10, it's not 11 days. So you got Yud Shvat, that works for us, for Nanak Lubavitches, very, very conveniently. But the Torah says Achad Asar. It says 11 days. So I guess Nitzad Vayelech divided in half. For a lot of reasons this is problematic. But one thing is for sure, you would never have thought of this interpretation. So we're left with 3 opinions of when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. For starters, Rish Chodesh Shvat, Yud Aleph Shvat, or Zayin Adar. And believe me, there's more. So, in other words, if you thought you were not, as they say in the scholarly world, if you're not confused yet, keep reading, that's all. Now you have the Shach HaTorah, page 10. Okay, I'm going to skip the Shach. Although the Shach is most important, because the Shach sets the stage for the Hasidus that we're going to learn in Mitzvah Tuesday night, but we already touched on the Shach in the Medrash. And the Shach says, that they violated the 10 commandments they heard at Har Sinai by making the golden calf. The Hasidus of Mitzvah will do it Tuesday night. So the Shach we're going to skip, although the Shach is one of my favorites. And on page 11 you have the Panim Yafis. Panim Yafis is, okay, we'll start Tuesday with Panim Yafis. So Tuesday we'll do the Panim Yafis and the Arizal, which is page 13, and then we'll go into the Maimer. Okay? So we had a class.